And we are live. Hi, I'm Marla Miller from marlamiller.com, presenting our 5th episode of Literary Salon's Learning Prose from the Pros. I'm delighted today to have this pro, Claire Lazebnik, with me. This is the second time that I have interviewed Claire. First time was at the Southern California Writers Conference a couple of years ago when her adult novel, If You Were Here, You'd Be, I'm sorry, If You Lived Here, You'd Be Home Now. I just adored, and she came and spoke at the Southern California Writers Conference. When that book came out, her latest book, and I think it's her 3rd YA, but she'll let us know, is called The Last Best Kiss, and it's kind of a Jane Austen, modern day, situated in LA kind of romance, and it's set in a high school. Claire Lazebnik, welcome to Literary Salon, and thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. I apologize for the dogs barking in the background.
That's okay. You know, we get dogs, we get kids, we get cats. So
okay.
We'll just deal with whatever comes our way. It's one of the it's one of the fun things about being live. And you know how when there are live shows on TV and they always say that this is live, folks, they mean it. Okay, Claire. So The Last Best Kiss is it your 3rd YA novel?
Yes, correct.
Okay. And but you also have another book, Overcoming Autism. What I didn't tell our listeners, and what I wanted to say at the beginning of this, and I'll just say it right now. I mean, I really launched this show to be educational, also informative and entertaining, but educational. And you have been around the writing block for quite a while. I don't know what your first book was, but I think you have 11 so far. A couple of those are nonfiction. There's a topic in nonfiction that's very close to your heart, autism. And I believe that you have just put out your 2nd or 3rd book, Overcoming Autism, as well. Is that correct, in 2014? You've got 2 books out?
Yeah, what it really was there are 2 that were already out. Overcoming Autism is mostly about the elementary school years, advice for those.
Oh,
and then
okay.
my co-author and I wrote one called Growing Up on the Spectrum, which is for middle school through young adult years.
Okay.
And we wrote both of those a little while ago, and it's been almost a decade since Overcoming Autism first came out. So this year we released an updated, edited, revised edition with 40% new material. So so it's sort of 2.5 books, I guess, is how I would describe it.
And so is the new edition, have we expanded the age? Are you now, or have you kept it in the childhood framework?
It's still in those early years.
Okay.
As we felt we had the other book to sort of cover the other topics. It was more to sort of, like I said, bring it up to date because it's used in a lot of classrooms. We use it in a lot of graduate programs and things like that. So we wanted to just make sure that all the studies, I mean, the advice is pretty much the same, but we wanted to make sure that all the studies were up to date.
We could have a whole show just on that. I know that you have a deep connection to autism because one of your children is on the spectrum, and I'm assuming that that's what got you to this health issue in our culture. And also your co-author, isn't she from Santa Barbara? She's a fairly well-noted psychologist from the United States, but she lives in Santa Barbara, yes?
Yes, in fact, she and her husband, who is in the same field, together run the Kegel, that's their last name, the Kegel Autism Center at the University of California in Santa Barbara.
Wonderful.
So,
well, you know what I'm thinking of is I'm going to whisper in our director's ear at the Santa Barbara Writers Conference. You guys really should be up here at our conference. I mean, we could have you doing fiction and her doing, the 2 of you doing nonfiction together, but I'm going to keep that in my inventory because that topic, as you well know, and we won't spend too much time on it right now, but boy, you know, it just gets hit at from all angles, from celebrity, from woo-woo, from obviously hardcore clinical research. It's for a parent who is dealing with this with their child. Boy, it's like, who do you follow and where do you go? So I'm assuming that Overcoming Autism is certainly a book that listeners should be picking up.
Yes. Yes, and one of the things about it really fast is that it really is aimed for people who are completely bewildered but want to start being active right away. It's a real sort of roll up your sleeves, plunge right in, learn how to respond to your child in ways that will bring about growth and improvement, and that's the thing we're proudest of.
One
It's
of the
not
things
for experts.
One of the things that I like to talk about in Literary Salon, Claire, is building author platform. And I just want to say that if you have not, if people haven't read your blogs, because they're on Goodreads, they get lots of readings on Goodreads. You post them on Facebook. They're really pretty much all over. But you had a killer blog out, I think it was last week, on autism, but also just on children, on accepting children who they are and where they are and not what you want them to be. And what I loved about that blog is that you used your, or you brought in your teenage daughter. I related to this very much. You know, who's very, very talented in some things, but she may not be talented in other things. And doggone it, but what you're saying as a mother in that blog is, listen to your kids, pay attention to your kids, and look at what their assets are, not perhaps what you want them to be, or maybe what your assets were.
That's right. And one of the things, as you just mentioned, autism's a hot spot. People have strong emotions these days. So I was sort of writing about autism, but it does make people more open to what you're saying sometimes if you take the autism out of it. So the point I was making was about all children, and so I used my daughter, who's not on the spectrum, as the example, because the second you necessarily use someone with autism, people start bringing all their baggage to it. So it's sometimes you have to step back and say, all kids are our kids, and let's look at them all. Yes, there are more pressing things. There are bigger issues. We all understand that somebody on the spectrum has his own needs. On the other hand, there are universalities and generalities about how you parent, and let's look at those, because then you won't bring that other stuff to it. And that's sort of what I did.
And for listeners out there who just want to follow Claire Lazebnik, really follow her blog. It's terrific. She doesn't write a blog unless she has something to say, and she knows how to say it with words. So let's segue a little bit, if we can, to The Last Best Kiss, which is your third YA novel, and that's out by HarperCollins. Yes, Harper Teen?
Yes, Harper Teen.
Okay. And so this is a takeoff. Well, not a takeoff, but there's a little bit of Austen in here. You want to talk about perhaps your protagonist in The Last Best Kiss, and anything else you want to talk about this?
Yeah, well, thank you. Yes, all my YA is very loosely based on Austen's novels. So The Last Best Kiss is my Persuasion, my homage to Persuasion.
Got it.
Which, the second I thought about it as a teen novel, there are other Austen novels that don't translate as fluidly, but this one, because they're, about class distinctions, stuff like that. But this one instantly, anyone who's read Persuasion knows it's about making a mistake and having regret and trying to basically atone and figure out, whether you can ever make up for this one mistake you made. And to me, it just brought in sort of that transition from sort of middle school and ninth grade, and that stage in your life where you're desperate to please your friends and you don't quite know who you are, and you do make mistakes because you don't yet have that sense of security, that ability to say, this is who I am and this is what I believe. So you look around and you see what your friends are doing, and you make some mistakes because you think, I want everyone to accept me. So that's what our protagonist does. She looks around. She likes this one boy, but he's nerdy. He's small. He's not part of her friendship group, and her friends are sort of contemptuous of him. And so she doesn't have the guts to stick up for him and say, I like him. And instead, she pretends she doesn't really know him very well in front of her friends. And that's it so deeply hurts his feelings that he walks away from her, and then he happens to actually leave town. But most of the story takes place when they're in 12th grade, 3 years later, And he's back. He's taller. He's handsome.
He's taller.
He's successful. He's now the new kid in school, which, the other girls, are sort of, everyone's eager to see someone new by the time 12th grade rolls around.
You bet.
And, he's a kind person, but he remembers what she did, and he's not going to take another chance with her. He's not going to forgive her too easily. And she knows that she made a mistake. It's not, there's something deep in her that knows that she has a lot to do, that maybe she just messed it up permanently. Maybe there's no way to fix it. So, but she's also a good person, and that's part of what I like in my teen novels. And I got somebody wrote to me recently about it, a fan letter, about how they're good people who make mistakes, which I think is really relatable for all of us. That feeling of you mean well, but you make mistakes.
You bet, and that happens at every single age in life. I just had this discussion with my 26-year-old, and I said, honey, you pick yourself up, you move on, and don't expect it to be your last mistake, because it won't be. You just learn, hopefully you learn from each one. But I want to talk, this is a good place for us to shift into a little bit of craft, if you don't mind, Claire. Voice. Okay, you write adult fiction, you write young adult fiction. Could you talk to us about your protagonist in The Last Best Kiss and when she came to you? Had you just read Persuasion again, perhaps? Are you so familiar with Austen's work that those stories are just in your memory bank at all times? So when you go on a walk and you start hearing voices, perhaps you already know that, that's a teenage voice, as opposed to... Talk a little bit about voice, if you would.
Well, the one thing that I've done in all my YA novels is use the first person, because I find that in your teen years you really you live life a little more on the surface. I have a teenage daughter, and she's, the emotions are flying off of her most days, and a couple of my adult novels were also in the first person, but a couple of them weren't. And because there are advantages when you're telling a story to being able to dip in and out of other people's minds. But to me, the teen voice is stronger when it's all internal, and everything is being filtered through this one person's perception. It's also easier to keep secrets from this one person. It's when you only have one person's perspective, the world gets a little bit... it's less clear, right? You can't argue, there's no omniscient narrator knowing what's going on in the next room. You only know what's going on in that room. And I think, again, the teen years are sort of like that. You're a little bit, people are making decisions for you that you're not part of, and sometimes you feel a little bit like you're not getting the whole picture. So I felt... That's
interesting, yeah.
Yeah. So the first person has worked really well. I do know the Austen novels very well, so I was able to get the first broad outlines without having to reread. My first thought, Persuasion, like I said, brilliant, easy transition. But I did reread them the reason why I'm speaking in the plural is because my other YA novels are also based on Austen. So my first one was Pride and Prejudice, second one was Mansfield Park, this one's Persuasion, and then I have a very loosely based novel that's very loosely based on Emma coming out next year. So,
Claire, before you even go on, could you link your novel titles with the Austen titles, if you wouldn't mind, for our listeners?
They're pretty far removed, so you wouldn't know necessarily, and my hope is that people can read them without knowing the Austen. But Epic Fail is the first one, and that's based on Pride and Prejudice.
Okay.
The next one is called The Trouble with Flirting, and that's based on Mansfield Park. If you remember it, there's a character who's very flirtatious in Mansfield Park and very appealing, and he plays a very big role in the in my version. And this one, Last Best Kiss, is Persuasion, and the one that's coming out next year that is based on Emma is called Wrong About the Guy.
And will that be in first person as well?
Yes. Yes.
What's interesting is, as I was listening to you talk about first person and how it's such a nice fit for YA, I was thinking, well, yeah, that makes total sense, because when you're a teenager, really you're so egocentric and everything really is just about you, and you really can't really see the world in that three-dimensional form that hopefully as you get older and more mature your eye, your view expands. But when you're a teenager, you're either, it really is all about you, isn't it?
That's right, and it was really fun. I just finished one that's loosely based on Emma, and if you've read Emma, you know she's wonderful. She's bright,
Yeah.
she's beautiful, she's sort of talented. Maybe not as talented as she thinks, but she
And
is.
she thinks she is.
She's a little full of herself. She's a little, and
Yeah.
she's called out in the course of the novel on it that she's been spoiled and all that. And again, perfect for the teen years of sort of thinking,
Totally.
yeah, I know everything, and then gradually being humbled, which is what growing up is, right? It's sort of a process of being humbled.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah.
And so when you decided that you wanted, let's talk a little bit, because you have such a breadth of work out there in fiction and in nonfiction and adult and YA. When you wrote if you don't mind going back just a little bit, Claire, I should tell our listeners that you come from a really talented family, and so much so that I'm hoping someday to write a piece on the Scoville sisters. But you have two sisters who are known in the literary world, and your husband is known in the writing world as well. And so and you also, I think, were you the Scoville who got into Harvard at the ripe old age of 16?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I love that. Our listeners will love that too. It's why I want to write this story, or at least it's one of the reasons. But so books have been a part of your life, your whole life, I'm assuming.
Yeah, it's funny. There are two main sources. One is my father was an English major, believe it or not.
Okay. I would believe that.
And he didn't go into the field, but he did really try to pass on to us his love for a lot of things. And I remember he had us all memorize the first stanza of the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock by T.S. Eliot when we were still fairly young. So that was one.
Smart man.
And then my grandmother, my mother's mother, loved to read. She did not have much of an education, but she read everything she could get her hands on from the time she was a little girl, and continued to as when I knew her. And so she told me when I was still too little to read and would sleep over her apartment, she would tell me stories like Great Expectations and Jane Eyre. She told us a bedtime story. And I have to say that I wrote my college thesis on Jane Eyre, and I always thought of that as this wonderful continuity from the bedtime story my grandmother told me to writing a college thesis on it.
Oh, lovely. I mean, that's really lovely. So would you say to listeners out there who perhaps are at the beginning of their writing life or want to get better, that there's no substitute for, if you're not writing, you should be reading?
100%, absolutely. And in fact, in college, I made a very deliberate choice not to be a creative writing major. I chose to be an English literature major because I felt like either I could sit there and read stuff that other students were writing in workshops in the creative writing major, or I could be reading the best of English and American literature and discussing that. And I decided I was going to learn the most from reading those great works of literature. And I was, 19th century British literature was, as you can tell, it's still influencing me. That was
absolutely. So take us back, if you would, to your first novel. So you graduated from Harvard, and I mean, not to make this autobiographical, but if you could kind of bring us along on, I assume that you were writing from the time you were little. We know that you were reading, and so your first novel came out when you were. I don't know that, but talk to us about that first novel, the idea, and how long from idea to publication, if you recall.
Okay, so as much as I'd love to leave this part out of the story, I should mention that I'd written a couple of novels that I didn't sell.
Good. I love to hear that, Claire. I love to hear that.
I think it's important. It really is. I'm just joking because it's important for everyone who wants to get published out there to know. And I should also say that many of the successful writers I know had works they couldn't get off the ground. So it's really important to know the first one may not go, the second one may not go, the third one may not go. Right. But keep writing, you'll keep getting better. And I did have agents, I just never sold those two. So then I took sort of a break because I was having a lot of kids. I have 4 kids, and it was when the youngest one was a baby. I decided I didn't want full-time care in the house, that I wanted to take care of the kids myself. So I made that choice because I had the luxury of having that be a choice.
Mm-hmm.
And I was spending so much time with the kids that I felt like whenever I had a free minute, I had to do something that was sort of for me and that was creative and that was intellectual. And so starting when he was about 6 months old, I would use every nap time to start writing this novel that eventually got published. The first one was by St. Martin's Press.
Okay.
And that was literally written nap time and after the kids were in bed at night. Those were
Tell us
when.
the title of your first one.
Yes. Sorry, that was Same as It Never Was the first one.
Okay. That was the first one. So that was written during nap time when the kids went to bed, and St. Martin's published it. Do you remember how long it took you to write from writing to publication of that one?
You know, the writing was the fastest part because I was like, I was storing it up, and my husband once pointed out that I'd worn off the letters on my laptop because I was like, when I get to it, I was so furious. Just typing and typing and typing and typing. So I actually wrote that one fairly quickly. It took me a little while to get an agent. I did get an agent. I got a very good agent. And then, but it took her, she looked at it. I heard the story after the fact. She looked at it, put it aside. And 6 months went by. She picked it up again. I don't know why, but thank goodness she did. And then decided to represent it. And then it got the usual, it got rejections from editors, and then finally one editor said, I like it. And I still remember the moment of hearing that news and how exciting it was. So that, I honestly don't remember. It took a long time. I mean, because it took, I wrote it, then I had to get the agent, then I had to get an editor, and then I had to rewrite it. So, it was a couple of years from first idea to seeing it in print.
One of the reasons why I always ask this of my authors who guest on Literary Salon is because I really want all of us to be hearing this. We now have, as you well know, the option of indie publishing, and that's terrific. I think, the more competition, the better. I have no problem with indie publishing. What I am concerned about is when I see authors who say, the book is ready to go now, I'm designing my cover, and they've spent 6 months writing the book, and it always makes me kind of scratch my head, and so I like it when authors who have a long tail out here, as we now call it, who say, I was rejected, it took several years. Jane Smiley said, I had my first 3 novels published, but quite frankly, they're drafts, and probably that wouldn't have happened today. But her first one was published in 1981. I love that because writing is an art form, and it's a craft that you have to master, and no craft is mastered quickly. Would you?
That's right.
Yeah,
and
it just isn't.
The very first editor who did buy it saying to me, okay, I want you to take it back and cut 10%. It's too long, it's too wordy, cut 10% and it will be much better.
And did you agree at the time?
And I think of that when I go through my drafts,
Good.
not even the first draft, because the first draft is a mess. I mean, the first draft is just an outline, really. But by the time I've got a decent draft, I do that one last pass just thinking, what do I not need here? What is just adding verbiage without adding anything else? It was a really good lesson, and she was a good editor.
And you've applied that to all of the books that you have penned since then?
Absolutely. In fact, I find that the more I can strip them down, the better they are. Absolutely.
All right. So talk a little bit about overcoming autism. So what are you doing? I know that you do interviews and you do, I'm assuming maybe some blog tours for your fiction, but what are you doing for your nonfiction out here? How are you getting Overcoming Autism out to the community of readers who are waiting and wanting to read this book?
It's been hard. First of all, it was a long time ago. So back when it first came out, my co-author, who is the actual clinician, I'm the mom and the writer, but not a clinician. She toured. She was sent to various places by the publishing house. She and her husband speak at a lot of conferences. The book is always at the conferences, and so she has that ability. When we did the revised edition this year, we were frustrated because we wanted people to think of it as a new book, to be aware of it, to have it written about, and we just couldn't break through. We just couldn't get people to see it that way, and to make, to write stories about it. I mean, I felt there was a very big story there because what we had written about 10 years ago was right. Everything we'd written was right, and so many things have fallen by the wayside and been proven wrong. And I wanted someone to give us a little cheer for that. But when it comes to the autism world and nonfiction in general, people like sexy stories. They don't like just workmanlike things to write about.
That's the truth, but I'll tell you, that would, I mean, I hope you do get that hook out there, Claire, because 10 years ago, I know very well what was going on in the autism world. And I think it's very, very important to let the world know that Overcoming Autism was a book that didn't buy into all that crap then, and it's tried and true, and its theories are stable and reliable 10 years later. So I hope that anyone listening out there who might be in the allied healthcare professions take a look at Overcoming Autism, because that's important, what you just said, really important.
Thank you, yeah.
All right, last thing, and we started a little late, so I'm keeping you a little after the noon hour, but The Last Best Kiss. Tell us a little bit about your promotion. What are you doing for it? Where can we see you? Can we?
You know, I got to tell you honestly, I've been frustrated by the ratio of time put into what's come out of it for most things like book signings and stuff like that. I'm not an outgoing person. I've got a lot of social anxiety, so I have to really like gird myself up to do anything like that.
Got it.
And I just found that you know, I get my friends to show up, and it's really hard to get other people at a lot of events. So I really stick to online things. I try to, you know, anyone, I'll do any guest, with all my YA novels, any guest blog that people wanted me to write that was both, I would write about anything as long as I could include a little promotion of the book, you know,
Sure.
About romance and novels, about, you know, young adult versus adult, about, you know, Austen, whatever people wanted. I'm pretty much willing to write about as long as I can get a little promotion in there. And I don't know. I haven't, honestly, I haven't figured it out.
Well, I will tell you that in terms of doing book tours, I mean, doing book signings in bookstores, I do think that that's a dinosaur. I mean,
yeah.
I know that people still think, especially entry-level authors, think it's so glamorous to go on but the fact of the matter is, as you just said, if you can get your friends to show up in your hometown, that's cool. But it's really, really hard to make those book tours profitable, which is why most of the big houses have cut them out or have said to authors, if you want to do them, go ahead and do them, but you're going to do them on your own dime, because they just are not, they don't reach the masses. I guess in the old days they did, but I've been in this business for a long time, and writers have complained about the reality versus the fantasy of those book tours for a very long time. I think what we're doing now is, you know, terrific. I mean, that we have these marketing tools available to us today as writers and authors is fabulous, and you sure don't seem like you're shy at all online.
I'm great online.
Not at all, Claire. I ain't picking up any shyness at all. Tell us just a little bit about what you're working on now, and then I will thank you profusely for showing up on Literary Salon today, and we'll get this interview out there ASAP. So you're working on, is it adult or did you say young adult?
Well, I've got this. Yeah, I've got this last young adult that's coming out in April, and so I just finished the copy edits on that. And now I'm trying to decide. I have a couple things started, but I'm not in the middle of a deal right now, which I have been for over a decade. I've had one deal or another that I was always working on, and I'm not right now. So I'm taking the rest of the summer off. I have getting married here next weekend, and my kids are home for the summer, so I am not even thinking about what I want to work on for the next 3 weeks, and then I'll either go back to a project I started, or I'm feeling a little bit itchy and antsy, like I want to do something completely different. So I'm trying to let it all germinate and figure out what's next.
Well, terrific, and I will of course keep tabs on you via Facebook, and when you do decide whatever that project is, I will pick up on it and probably be bugging you for another interview. I hope you don't mind.
Thank you so much. I love your support.
Listen, I'm delighted that you came on Literary Salon, learning prose from the pros. Claire Lazebnik certainly is a pro. She's also a very classy lady who's got a lovely social media presence out here. And so for all of our listeners on Literary Salon, if you're not following Claire Lazebnik on Facebook and any of the other places, Goodreads, man, she's all over Goodreads. You really should be, because you can learn a lot from this sort of author. Claire Lazebnik, thank you so much for coming on Literary Salon.
Thank you, Marla. I loved it.
Good. My pleasure. Bye to everyone. And episode 6 is coming up pretty soon. We don't know when, but Catherine Ryan Hyde will be our guest. Until the next time, be well and keep writing.